It was just her form of protest. She was all done. She knocked all those shoes off of the aisles, and it looked like a bomb went off in the shoe department at Walmart. And I just stood there and I went, this is not something that I've ever read about in a parenting book. I don't know what to do.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Karis, welcome to Focus on the Family for the first time.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We've had your mom and dad, Dr. Tim Kimmel on, and Darcy, your mom, and wonderful. I love their theme on grace-based discipline, your book now, Grace-Based Discipline. It's running in the family, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, our ministry, Family Matters, we have one channel, and that channel is grace. And we just love to see hearts transformed by the power of God's grace, and then for that transformation to extend to all of our relationships, whether that's with our spouse.
And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
Now, let's get to it. You believe parents have something to learn from firefighters. Okay, everybody's going, what? What? Firefighters, what can we learn in our parenting role from firefighters?
Well, actually, my brother is a firefighter with the Phoenix Fire Department, and so, I saw a lot of parallels with parenting because, honestly, our kids' behavior very often creates an emergency situation
Right.
in our homes. Maybe physically an emergency situation, but I mean more emotionally. And they just do stuff that just lights us up, lights a fire under us. And so we need to function like first responders. We need to be able to be calm and approach those situations with our kids the way a firefighter approaches one. And something I didn't know, but that my brother taught me, is that firefighters never run into a burning building. You would think that they do, and we see that on TV, so we just assume they, come out of the truck and they run straight in. And that's really not how it goes. I mean, obviously they are in a hurry. They're trying to be fast, but they're wearing all their gear. And they also don't always know exactly what they're coming into. So they're taking their time to approach the situation, to assess what's going on, to make sure that they don't expend themselves before they're even in it. And that way, once they're in the building, they can rescue who needs rescued. They can get the fire put out. They can respond instead of react.
And the analogy there is for the parents to walk briskly.
Right.
Don't run into a calamity.
Right. Don't run into calamity. Walk briskly. Obviously, we have to respond quickly, and sometimes with our kids, that's split second. But I guess I'm using it as a metaphor for how we have to keep our emotions in check.
You, in fact, had a Walmart experience that brought you, I think, to your knees a little. What you tell yours, I'll tell mine. Go ahead. What was your Walmart experience?
Well, my girls, again, were younger. I think a lot of this stuff, hits you hard on the front side of kind of the heavy lifting years of parenting, which is when they're,
is it because moms particularly are tired and, maybe
For
dads
sure.
too, but moms, I think, carry that load. I mean, it's just a lot.
Moms and dads are tired. And developmentally where the kids are, they just need everything. They need everything done for them. They're learning everything, and they need correction in everything, because that's the only way that they form their personalities and themselves into, contributing members of society. And they're definitely not that when they're 2-year-olds. And so I think my youngest one she was still in a baby carrier, and my older one was 2. And we'd been sick for 5 weeks, and we were out of everything, in our home. We had no groceries, we had no toilet paper, we had nothing. So we just needed everything. So, I psyched myself up to go on this run with both of my kids by myself to Walmart. And I was spent because I'd been sick as well. And so I had them in the cart, and my strategy was just to literally run through Walmart as fast as I could, grab everything. I mean, it was like supermarket sweep. Remember that old,
we know that feeling.
Show, and trying to just get it done. So I'm running through, getting everything, and my flip-flop broke. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and we wear flip-flops pretty much year-round. My flip-flop had broken. So I had a flat, and I would have just probably dealt with it and just had one shoe on and walked out to my car, except for the fact that it was July in Phoenix and the asphalt is probably 300 degrees,
Right.
and I would have burned my foot. And so I was like, well, at least I'm at Walmart. I can go buy some shoes. And so I'm like, the last thing I'm going to do, grab some sandals. I'll buy the first pair that I find. I don't care how ugly they are.
Right.
And then we'll check out and we'll go home. And so we were in the shoe department, and my older daughter, Riley, just sees being restrained in something like a shopping cart like a form of oppression. And she's starting petitions. She's writing to her Congress people. She is not going to have it. She's always been that way. And so I had a moment of weakness, and I let her out of the cart in the shoe department at Walmart. And all the veteran moms and dads know that was my biggest mistake right there. So she's out of the cart, and I just thought, okay, well, let's hurry here. Let's get this done. And she was all done. And so she stood on one end of an aisle of shoes, and she put her two little arms out to each side, and they were long enough that she could stand on one end of the aisle. She could walk to the other side and knock all the boxes of shoes
On
down.
both sides.
On both sides, just
That's quite a mess.
She's like walking, and it was just her form of protest. She was all done. She knocked all those shoes off of the aisles, and it looked like a bomb went off in the shoe department at Walmart. And I just stood there and I went, this is not something that I've ever read about in a parenting book. I don't know what to do.
So what did you do? Did you just go, spill on aisle 4, I got to leave?
Well, it's one of those situations where you run through scenarios in your head and you think, like, how quickly could I run out of the store carrying these two kids like a football?
Just
just
abandon
like a
the
football
cart
on
and
each
get
side.
out, right?
Abandon the cart and get
everything.
out. Make my
Abort.
husband go abort. Yeah, make my husband go later.
The mission is over.
And I was like, well, I can't do that. And so
you got through checkout.
We did get through checkout.
That's a brave mom right there.
But
So when you look at it, let's move into the grace-based discipline aspect of this again, because I think temperament plays a role in this in terms of makeup of mom and dad.
Yeah.
Some parents and some people are rule followers, and that's very important to them, and others are maybe like your daughter knocking shoes off the aisle, but they're like 23.
Yeah.
Not so much into the rules.
Yeah.
How does that play into the grace-based approach of discipline, and define it for us, and then we can get into all that?
Well, grace-based parenting and grace-based discipline is simply treating our kids the way that God treats us. And we know that God disciplines us because it says so in the Bible. And so we're just simply following the example that God sets with his children, because that's what we are. We're God's children. He's our parent.
Now, I hear that. Describe it for me. How God disciplines us.
God approaches his relationship with us. It's all because of grace. I mean, the only way we're able to have a relationship with a holy God is because of grace. And so when he disciplines us, he's doing it for our good. It's not about him punishing us. There's a huge difference between punishment and discipline, and I go into that in my book. But
punishing is often out of vindictiveness or anger.
Right.
Where, the grace-based approach is out of love for the person.
Out of love for the
but
person.
It doesn't, to the critic who's going to say, that's just too soft.
Yeah.
Especially those dads that can be pretty heavy-handed. And not to stereotype, I get it, but oftentimes the temperament of the hard style is with the dad.
Yeah.
I do it because I said to do it.
Yeah. Well, we have to balance rules and relationships. That's really, really important. I think Josh McDowell said rules without relationship leads to rebellion.
Yeah,
And
we've
then,
seen that.
It's a
which
great,
is so,
I
it's a
use
great
that
quote.
often.
And my dad, Tim Kimmel, kind of has expanded on that, and he says, but a relationship without rules leads to resentment. So we've got to have both.
Yeah,
if we
that's
don't
good.
have boundaries with our kids, they resent us because it doesn't prepare our kids for the life that they're going to face someday, for the world that they're going to face, if they don't understand how to respond to authority, how to follow rules, how to have self-discipline in their life. So we're not being gracious when we don't have rules and boundaries for our kids. And grace does not mean a lack of rules, because that's not how God treats us.
Karis, you mentioned a tactic in the book, which I found a little interesting. I want you to expand on it. You talk about putting things in the basket, kind of I think the bad behavior, the poor behavior, whatever it might be. What are you getting at to help parents understand to put those bad things in a basket?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right in the intro of my book, because I feel like it's a first step before you do anything else. And this goes back to what we were talking about with firefighters and being able to respond and not react. You've got to get your emotional reactions under control before you can really think, before you can analyze and respond. And so what the basket exercise is it's really just a mental exercise. It's just something that we visualize in our mind. And you can do this in the moment, or you can do it after the fact if you've had a really hard day with your kids where they have just brought you to the end and you don't really like them at the end of the day. It's easy for our relationship to become tinted and colored by being angry.
So you put them in a basket?
Well, it would be nice if we could do that. But how this works is, you imagine a basket or some kind of a container. And I like to visualize my kid, the things that they're doing that are annoying you or bothering you or that are wrong or that are hurting you, whatever it is. I imagine those behaviors almost like weights that are hanging off of my kids. I see them as external, right?
It's not their heart.
It's not their heart, right? We're separating their behavior from their heart. And so the way you do this is you just imagine those behaviors hanging off your children like weights, and then you imagine yourself one by one, name it, being untruthful or talking back or hitting their sister. You just imagine those things and you pull them off of your kid, you put them in a basket, and then you walk that basket into another room and put it up on a shelf.
What does that benefit you, the parent?
Well, the way that it benefits you is that it emotionally removes the threat. Because we go into sort of a fight or flight response a lot of the time in situations with our kids. When our kids have knocked all the shoes off of the aisle in Walmart, we're embarrassed, we're angry, we're annoyed. It kind of lights us up. And that would be a reaction. And very often our own emotions and reactions are going to steer us towards what's best for us, not what's best for our kids.
So true.
So when you remove those, you can separate the behavior from their heart and really see them for who they are.
And what I like is how you tie that then to the long view. This is probably, for me, I don't know about you, John, but for me, this is the aha in my parenting experience. And I feel like I've finally got it. And that is to take the long view. And you talk about that in your book by thinking 10 years down the line with that behavior that they're expressing.
Right.
And this has been one of the great things that has helped me in parenting my two teen boys is in the moment, their minds, their actual body chemistry, their brains are not fully formed. They're going to say and do things that are very teenager, very teenage boy in our case. And you need to absorb some of that.
Right.
You certainly deal with it and talk about it, and especially in a spiritual context. But it'll take some of the sting out of it if you think about, are they going to be doing this at 30?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And that's the key, isn't it?
That's the key. Yeah, my dad has a great line that he says, never drive in a thumbtack with a sledgehammer. He used to always say that to us when we were kids. And I'm like, I do not understand what this thing means, But then once I had kids, I got it. It's really easy to overreact to things that aren't that important or to underreact to things that are really important.
Let me ask you that because, again, you are picking up in a beautiful way with your mom and dad and what they've expressed over the years, this idea of grace. The opposite is kind of a stern, rules-based orientation. For the parents who have not caught that idea of grace, I guess there's two parts to this question. One is we can only dispense grace if we know grace.
Yeah.
So I speak to that. And then secondly, how do you know you're struggling, that you're not blind, that you don't have a blind spot? You think you're grace-filled, but you're actually more rules-oriented and more authoritarian.
Yeah.
How do you take a quick self-assessment? So those are two big questions.
Two big questions. So let me answer the first one first. I think a great biblical definition of grace is getting something that we desperately need but don't necessarily deserve.
Right.
And God gives us that. I mean, Christ's death on the cross and his payment for our sin, we don't deserve it. We don't deserve to have a relationship with a holy God based on our own merits, even if we're, quote unquote, good people. We're not perfect. And so we receive that grace from God because he said, I'm not going to judge you based on your sin. I am going to allow my son's righteousness to be laid over top of
Sufficient.
you, to be sufficient for you. And so that's biblical grace. And it doesn't mean that there are no rules and that God doesn't want us to obey him. Of course he wants us to obey him. He's a good father. But he doesn't want us to obey him for his sake. He wants us to obey him for our sake.
And for our love for him.
And out of love for him. Yeah.
So
as a
number one is
response.
just feeling that grace yourself.
Right.
And making sure you know forgiveness
Yeah.
and you understand it. And then you
Yeah.
can give it to
Yeah.
your kids
Right.
in this case.
And you didn't do anything to earn Christ's
Right.
favor, or God's favor.
Right.
You didn't do anything to earn his love, and you can't do anything to earn it.
Now for the mom who struggles, or dad who struggles in that area, they think they're grace-based, but maybe they're a little more judgmental.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easy to have blind spots here, although most people I meet, I think they know. Yeah, I
That's
think they
interesting.
know.
So it'll wear on them, even if maybe even their spouse doesn't know.
Well, it'll wear on them because it's exhausting to us.
Right.
It's exhausting to us. We're trying to constantly earn God's favor, and we're putting that same kind of pressure on our kids
Yes.
to look good, to do good, to be good. And we need to remember that only Christ is good.
Well, again, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, it sounds like balance is the way forward,
Balance
right?
is the
in
way
parenting.
forward, right?
You mentioned in your great book, Grace-Based Discipline, you talk about the sushi menu. Now, not everybody eats sushi, so we
Yeah.
got to talk about this. What is the sushi menu of discipline tactics?
Well, I came around to calling it a sushi menu because if you ever have eaten at a sushi restaurant, you it's not like other restaurants where you kind of pick one main
Thing, and it all
menu
comes.
item,
Yeah.
and that's what you get. With sushi, it's just a couple of pieces, so you can order a lot of stuff to make a full meal. And so the analogy there is that with discipline tactics, very, very rarely are you going to just do one thing that you're always going to do in every situation that's always going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a lot of different strategies and tactics that you think through in advance. And so when you are facing something with your kids, you can order a little of this, you can do a little of that. You're going to take a multi-pronged approach to dealing with discipline issues with your kids.
Yeah, that's good. Let's run through some of them. What are some of the sushi menu options in parenting tactics?
In parenting tactics, yes. So the first one at the top of the list, and the reason it's there is because this is one of the things that I say, if you don't know what else to do, and if you can't do anything else for whatever reason in the moment, do this one thing. And I call this tagging behavior. And what this means is if your child does something, it simply means naming the thing that they're doing.
Example?
So if your child says something that isn't true, you just say, what you just said was not true. We're truthful in our home. And that's tagging behavior. Or they're violent. They lash out and they smack you. And you can grab their little hand and say, we don't hit. That was hitting.
So you name it for what
so
it
you
is,
name
and
it
they
for
get
what it
it
is.
conditions them to know that you know.
Right. And here, I mean, this is a little bit of, it's almost like training an animal. And I'm not comparing our kids to animals, although sometimes
There are some applications.
No, it's fair. You're
Yeah.
training them what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, but it's almost like clicker training. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
seen a dog trainer do this. They give a click and then they give a treat or a positive reinforcement after that. But what they're doing is they're immediately marking the behavior that they want with a little,
Right.
and then they treat because you can't even pull the reinforcement out fast enough to really help the animal know that's exactly right.
Right.
And so you can do this with positive things that you want as well. You can say, oh, I love how you were so kind right there.
Right.
But you can also do it with the negative behavior that you don't want.
I think it's important too to remember that, in a moment to do the positive things too.
Yeah, do the
and,
positive
and
things
not
too.
just always the negative
Right,
things.
so-
All right, tagging behavior.
So
I got
tag
it.
behavior.
Pardon.
Yeah, and you can pardon. You can choose to
You've got
say-
that authority?
Right, you do. You have that authority. But remember, you've tagged the behavior. So
Right.
you're not saying nothing. You're not just completely letting it go. You've tagged the behavior. You've named it. They know that you recognized it, right? But you can choose in that moment to say, we're not going to do anything more right now. But I don't
next
want to see
time-
that happen again, right? You can choose to ignore it. Some types of behavior we actually reinforce by responding to them.
That's true.
Things like whining or, negative attention-seeking behaviors that our kids do. If we say, "Don't do that," "Don't yell," "don't," we're kind of pulling back on them, and it's
Right.
almost causing them to get more riled up and lean forward
Right.
into these behaviors. So ignoring can be powerful. We need to teach. That's one thing. They don't know what to do a lot of the time, right?
Correct. And we'll cover the rest of the list. We'll post it online so
Okay.
the listeners
Yeah.
can go there and see the ones we've talked about and the ones we haven't. Let's end here, and you touched on this as well, and that is age-appropriate kind of consequences. Parents this is the biggest question parents have. Our kids are 3 and 5. What are the right kind of consequences to employ?
Right.
For the moment. Let's touch on that. And again, we'll put some of that online so the listeners can see that too. But you break it down to toddlers, preschoolers, school-age children, tweens, and teens. Just give us a couple of examples.
So, I talk in my book about a concept called developmental currency when it comes to choosing appropriate consequences for our kids. For something to be an effective consequence, it has to cost something, right?
Right.
It has to apply some kind of pain, and I don't just mean physical pain. That could be it, but I really mean more emotional pain. Something
ouch.
that is an ouch, right?
Right.
That trains them that this is not what we want to have happen. But if it's going to cost them something, they have to pay for it in their currency. If we're asking them to give up something that they don't value, that's not going to be an effective consequence. So let's talk about toddlers, because I think a lot of your listeners have kids
Sure,
in that
yeah.
age range. And a lot of the people I talk to, this is where they're struggling. A toddler's currency is possessing something. And this just follows a developmental, pattern. Their
Sure.
brains are developing.
Mine.
So mine, right, exactly. You see it happen.
You've experienced that, I
I
see.
think
Yes.
both as a child and as a parent.
Yes. If they can see it, they assume that it belongs to them.
Right.
If they see it and they want it, they say mine. So specifically possessing objects, they kind of view everything as objects, even people.
Right.
And this is just developmental. And so it doesn't help them. It's not an effective consequence to say, if you do that again, you're not going to be able to go to the park with Billy next Thursday.
Right. They're not connecting
They
all
don't
those dots.
care about Billy. They don't know when next Thursday is.
Yeah, right.
And they can't even conceive of going to the park next Thursday.
Right.
That's not effective.
So what is effective?
So what is effective is immediately removing maybe something in their possession or removing them from the situation that they're in. We call this the Vulcan transport, right? You're at this point, you're bigger than your child. You can pick them up and move them quickly.
right.
And so
Teleport.
teleport, right? So you kind of, if you're at home or if you're even, out at a store, you can quickly kind of grab them real quick and you can move them to another place, whether it's back into their room. Do it quickly. It doesn't hurt. You're not causing them any physical pain, but it's a jolt. And it just kind of takes them out of their head for a minute. And then you can say, whatever it is that they do, you're going to sit here a minute
Right.
and then we'll go back.
And they go, ouch.
So it's a correction.
Yeah. So that's toddlers. You got
That's
preschoolers
toddlers.
and school-age
Yeah,
children. Let's pick a
preschoolers,
tween.
school-age
Let's do a
children.
tween one. And
Yeah, because tweens is kind of the other,
hopefully they're not saying mine at this point, but they could
well,
be.
they kind of are, but in more sophisticated language, right? And so a tween's currency is belonging,
Yeah.
right?
Social.
They want, yes, they're trying to find their place in the world. It's really important to them to fit in. And so all the things that go along with that, whether it's, fitting in means having the type of possessions that they think they need to have to fit in, or being able to go the places that they want to go to fit in, or do the things, or being around their friends. Even if your child is more of an introvert, that is still their currency.
Sure.
So you need to, if you're going to give them a consequence for something, you need to act on that currency. And so maybe that means you repossess their phone or devices for a certain period of time, or that means that you don't allow them to go somewhere that they've wanted to go. you have to really know your kid and
Right.
know what makes them tick.
What's important to them.
What's important to them, but that belonging is really driving a lot of what they're doing at
And
that point.
it's really good. And of course, if the toddler or the tween isn't hitting where you're at in your parenting spot, Karis's book, Grace-Based Discipline, will cover the other areas. Get a copy. I mean, here at Focus on the Family, we want to equip you. We want you to do the job as best as you can do. And it's hard to do it without a manual, honestly. I'd love to parent the second time, which I think is called grandparenting, right? But from a distance. But it's such, you learn it, and then you learn so much through the process that you don't get to apply again because it's done. But these are the great things that people have learned, Karis, her family, and I think this is one of those resources that can really help you. So for a gift of any amount, help the ministry here at Focus to touch parents and to do help them do a better job in their parenting. And our way of saying thank you is to send you a copy of Grace-Based Discipline as our way of saying thank you. And Karis, I've got one more question for you, but John, how do people get a copy?
Well, they can go online, focusonthefamily.com/rodcast, or give us a call, 800, the letter A in the word family, 800-232-6459. And I'll encourage you to get a CD of this conversation or the download. And I've got to say, Karis, I really appreciated the reminder that we were just talking about, the importance of belonging to teens. That was a good reminder for me with a 14-year-old right now. So
What's their currency?
Yeah, that's a great concept. You'll find more detail in Karis's book, Grace-Based Discipline. Get a copy from us today.
Karis, as we end, I'm mindful of that parent that feels they just haven't done it well. Maybe they have kids that are 15, 16, 17, and they've been very rules-oriented. What is something they can do to be more hopeful? What's an action? I know that's a very difficult question, but if they're in that desperate spot, you've counseled with parents that are there, what would you say to them?
Well, that's what is amazing about grace, right? It can just cover over our mistakes. That's what its purpose is, to cover a multitude of mistakes. And so if you realize that you've been legalistic and rules oriented and you feel like that's damaged your relationship with your kids, the first thing you do is just pray, ask the Lord to point out these areas in your life, ask to receive His grace for the ways that you have messed up and His forgiveness, and accept forgiveness for yourself. We are so reluctant to accept God's forgiveness for ourselves and to forgive ourselves. We just continue to hang on to it and to beat ourselves over the head with our mistakes. And, the enemy wins when we do that.
So true.
He just wins.
So true.
And so accept that forgiveness, let that grace transform you, and then go. I mean, if you feel like your kids are old enough and you can talk specifically about this kind of stuff with them, and I would encourage you to, go to your children and say, hey, I kind of have had this awakening about grace, and I realize that I have made mistakes with you. I'm not perfect. And ask them to forgive you.
Yeah.
Ask your kids to forgive
Could be
you.
the best thing you've ever done.
It could be the turning point in your relationship and the difference between you having a great, deep relationship with your kids down the road or it just being strained.
Yeah.
It really
so
can.
Good. Karis, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm John Fuller, and thanks for watching. Get more info about Focus over here and more from our guests over there, and be sure to subscribe to our channel as well.